Welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast.
To me, being perfect is not about that scoreboard out there.
This is a chance of a lifetime.
When you can understand the person, you can then work towards a common goal.
We are all on the same team.
Know your role and do it to the best of your ability.
Focus on the fundamentals. We've gone over time and time again.
Your defense has got to be better.
Leave no doubt tonight.
Great moments are born from great opportunity.
Hello and welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast. My name is Paul Barnett, and here on the podcast, we believe that there is no algorithm for leadership, and so we interview great sports coaches from around the world to try and find a couple of ideas to help us all be better leaders. Our great coach on this episode is Tom Herman. Tom is an American football coach. After graduating from university, he began his coaching career in 1998 at Texas Lutheran as a receivers coach. He then took a position in 1999 at the University of Texas at Austin as a graduate assistant under the mentorship of Greg Davis. He then joined Texas State as the offensive coordinator in 2005, and from there he went to Rice, where he helped set up the program. Then in 2011, he got his break when Urban Meyer selected him as his offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach for the Buckeyes. He was then hired by Houston as its new head football coach in 2014, before joining Powerhouse Texas as head coach in 2016. After a tumultuous few years at Texas with some highs and some lows, he then joined the Florida Atlantic Owls in 2022. And just before we go to the interview, today's podcast is brought to you by the Macquarie University Business School's MBA program. Designed to empower, challenge and transform, the Macquarie MBA gives you the business skills and knowledge you need to succeed in an evolving global economy. To find out more, search for Macquarie University Business School's MBA. And now, please enjoy our interview with Tom Herman.
You're listening to the Great Coaches Podcast.
Coach Herman, good morning and welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you for coming along and making the time. And of course, I'm joined tonight by another great coach who will be my co-interviewer tonight, Hugh McCutcheon. How are you, Hugh?
G'day, Paul. Yeah, doing well, thank you. And evening for you, I'd imagine, morning for us. But there you go, the joys of time zones.
Yes, getting close
Global podcast.
Global podcast, getting close to midnight here. But it's not about me, Coach Herman. It's about you. Could you tell us where you are in the world and what you've been doing so far today?
Yes, sir. I am in Boca Raton, Florida, here in South Florida, about 40 miles north of Miami. And I'm the head football coach at Florida Atlantic University in the American Conference.
Looking forward to hearing all about that. But could I start by going back a little bit in your history, because you've been with some pretty good coaches in your apprenticeship. I can see there's Greg Davis in there, and of course David Shaw, who's well known to a lot of us. But could I start by asking you, what is it you think the great coaches do differently that sets them apart?
Whoa, how much time do we have? Well, I think the answer is probably that they all have something maybe unique and or different, than most people. But I think all of that, if there was a silver bullet answer, we would all bottle it up and sell it, right? And what makes Nick Saban great is different than what makes Barack Obama great, and so I think it depends a lot in the field that you're in, but I think a few things translate. One, relationships with people. I think although leaders are certainly in charge, they've got a pulse and a great relationship with people. They find a way to connect. And we talk about the 3 C's of trust: character, competency, and connection. So one, that for somebody to trust you as a leader, let's say, you've got to have good character. You got to show them that you have their best interest in mind and the organization's best interest in mind. competency that the people that you lead have to believe that you know what you're doing and you have a track record to prove it. And then probably the most important C is connection, as I mentioned as my first one. Just the ability to, whether it be through communicative skills or nonverbal skills, all the different methods that we have to communicate, just a way to reach deep inside the people that you're leading, not just their brain, but their heart. And that's hard to quantify. It's hard to even define. But probably the best word is connection.
Well, and not to mess up the alliteration there, but I think to your earlier question or earlier point around, everybody's got their own special sauce. It's authentic connection is probably what you're speaking to. Is we've got to connect with our athletes in a way that works for you.
I'm
like
not talking about
what works
Zoom.
for
Nick
maybe
exactly.
doesn't work for you, right? So
right.
That's the deal.
That is very unique as well. That's a good point, Hugh, that, depending on how many people you lead and the scope of your organization, especially nowadays, and, as I get more and more gray hair in this little beard of mine, and the kids I coach seem to get younger and younger. It's got to be tailor-made a little bit. It's got to be very individualized, and there can't be kind of this cattle call of connection, if you will. It's a very intimate relationship. I think that's probably the thing I miss the most about being a position coach. When you go from being a position coach, especially the position I coach, quarterbacks, I'm coaching 5-6 guys, one of them only plays in the game at a time. And so you develop very, very deep, meaningful, intimate relationships with those guys. And then you go become the head coach. And now you've got a staff of, 10 assistant coaches and 40 support staff members, a roster of 120. It's much different than leading 6 people. You go from leading, 6 people, or even as the offensive coordinator leading an entire side of the ball, then you go to leading 150 individuals, and it's very, very difficult to get those intimate relationships when the scope is so big.
Right. Well, and the power dynamic is different as well. Obviously, as the head coach, you're making decisions. As the assistant, you're making suggestions, and
that's a very good adage. No, it's spoken very well. Very good adage is, assistant coaches make suggestions, head coaches make decisions. And that's difficult because, in reading online and the different things I read, talking about the price of leadership, and oftentimes you have to, it's a great study in ethics even. I took ethics classes in college, and I think it's Kant, Immanuel Kant, talked about the greater good. I might be getting my philosophers wrong, but sometimes oftentimes you have to make decisions that's best for the organization that may not be in alignment with people that you love and you care about, but that test that relationship, and that is a difficult burden of leadership, if you will.
No question. Yeah, when you're the assistant coach, everyone will sit next to you on the bus. When you're the head coach, no one's going to sit next to you. But anyway,
it is probably the epitome of the expression, "It's lonely at the top," right? You go from drinking beers and everybody hanging out with you to, hey, it's 5 o'clock in the off season. Where's everybody at? Oh, they're going getting chicken wings, and they didn't take coach. I get it. I get it.
But listen, you started, at Texas Lutheran, wide receivers coach. Salary it wasn't significant, shall we say? So I think that's a really important litmus test. Why do we get into coaching? I think a lot of people get wrapped up, and it's easy to, and maybe even get enamored with the salary side of things. because people do make extraordinarily good livings from coaching. However, I think if the goal is to make money, go to Wall Street, start a hedge fund, maybe.
No doubt.
If the goal is to help people, then how you get in probably matters. And tell us a little bit about that start, and also, given that maybe financially it wasn't great, did you ever think about, man, I got to go do something else?
Yeah, I'll try to give you as best the Cliff Notes version as I can, but
sure.
No, so I was really bad at football, but really loved it. And, I played non-scholarship football at a small Division III private school that, I tell people I was so bad at football, I had to pay a university $30,000 a year just to play it in college. So, but I fell in love with it. I wanted a job where I woke up before the alarm clock, and I thought I was going to go into broadcasting, and I wasn't ready to leave the locker room. I was the only child of a single mom. Mm-hmm. Coaches were my dads, teammates were my brothers, and I just wasn't ready. And my coaches kind of said, "Hey, you've been a captain." As they counseled me on my future, they said, "You might want to try your hand at this." And I kind of knew. I for some reason, it always stuck with me that, hey, I've got to do this while I'm young, because, and I gave myself some goals getting to your next question. And basically what I said was, if I can't do this in reverse, I can't go take a job, get married, start earning a decent wage, and at 30 wake up and say, I screwed up, I want to go coach, and then go be a graduate assistant or some grunt at 30 years old with a wife and kid dependent on you, Right. And so I got in, I took the only job I had, which was a Division III job halfway across the country for $5,000 a year and a meal card to the cafeteria. My mom thought I was crazy, still owed all the student loans and whatnot. And so I gave myself a goal. I said, if I wasn't a FBS position coach or an FCS, what they call now, coordinator, by the time I was 30, that we were going to probably move back to California and chase my wife's dream at that point, because I loved football. I've made it my life, but I love my wife and kids more, and I didn't want to be chasing around some dream, knowing, because in that chasing process, by the time I was 30 years old. By the time I made $30,000, and that was $30,000 on the dot. So, my wife was my sugar mama for, 7-8 years until I made a livable salary in this. And so there's a lot of sacrifices that your family makes, and I didn't want them to have to make them for life for me to chase this dream. So you asked if I ever thought about not doing it, certainly, but I had a plan. And once I had that plan, I never thought about it again. I did get very close to that deadline though. And of that 30-year-old deadline to reach those couple goals. But I made it in the nick of time and kind of took off from there.
Tom, I'm always intrigued in American football about the role the coach plays in calling the plays in real time. And I'm wondering what you've learned on your journey about this line between calling the plays, and empowering and giving people the room to make their own decisions.
Well, I grew up in this profession coaching quarterbacks, and so I gravitated to that position. In my opinion, it's the most leadership-driven, intangible, dependent position in all of sports. So much goes into playing that position that cannot be measured with a stopwatch or a tape measure. And so I gravitated towards it. And, you asked about the freedom versus the structure. I think, one, I learned as a play caller very early, it's not about X's and O's, it's about Jimmy's and Joe's, meaning my great play design with really bad players is not going to work nearly as often as a simple play design with really good players. So it's always going to be about the players, certainly in crunch time, finding a way to feature them, to get them the ball, to have them on defense, the ball get to them by whatever you call. And so I think that was a big one that kind of went into, just philosophically throughout the course of the game is our best players, are they involved in the game throughout the course of the game? And then we put a lot on the quarterback at the line of scrimmage, probably more than any college program, very similar to an NFL offense in kind of what we ask the quarterback to do. And we give him tools. We teach him, religiously of kind of the indicators of what to look for. And then we kind of allow him in many situations to quote unquote get us in the right play or a better play than the one that was called. And I think there's a lot of trust that's involved in that process as well.
Tom, your early career progressed very quickly. I know you talked about getting to 30 and having $30,000, but from there it goes exponentially. And there's a time there where you're working for Urban Meyer. And then from there, you're appointed to your first head coaching role at the University of Houston. Now, there was a really interesting article in the Wall Street Journal just after you were hired. And you say, and this is a really interesting quote, you say, people can say that I'm just copying Urban Meyer. You're damn right I'm copying Urban Meyer. But I'm wondering now, years on, with more experience, I'm wondering what advice you'd give to other coaches when it comes to copying someone else.
Yeah, I think that what I meant by that was the philosophy that kind of the program was built on, and just the way the organization was run in my time there, I thought was brilliant. And it's hard to argue, in 3 years, we were 38-3, and won a national championship. And so, so much of what we do as a program mirrors what I learned there. A lot, a sprinkling of probably every head coach that I've worked for, you can find throughout our program. But you asked about, when you get your first kind of big role like that. For me, it was being a head coach. I think the biggest thing is internally, though, as much as you want to emulate all of the great things of the programs that you've been around and steer clear of some of the pitfalls that maybe got some of the not so good programs that you were involved in as well, you want to make sure that you're yourself, right? Internally, the way that you communicate, the way that you think, the way that your gut talks to you. I think, if you're not careful, you can change who you are internally as a person because you think this is what that role should look like. And I always, kind of think you got that role or you got to that position by being yourself. Why would you, screw around and change that part of it? So we're always, as leaders, learning, evolving, growing, maturing. But at the end of the day, who you are at the core, what you believe in, what you wake up passionate about every day. I hope you stay true to that as you try to mirror and mix and match all the great stuff that maybe you've learned or been a part of.
Yeah, I think that's right, Paul. I think we all pick up stuff along the way, but those elements of leadership or coaching, I mean, they have to be expressed through you.
No doubt. Yeah, we're all unique. We're all different. Yeah. And there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, right?
Yeah, sure.
And there's been, just like I say all the time, culture eats strategy for lunch, right? Like on our sport, world championships, national championships have been won with hundreds of different offenses or defensive schemes or what have you. It's not about the plays. It's the players, the talent that you have, and the culture that you surround that talent with. That's what wins, not plays. Plays don't matter, you know.
Yeah, they might help, but man, the better players you get, the better coach you become. That's for sure.
Amen. You know, it's funny. When I was at Iowa State, my first Power 5 coordinator job, I was there for 3 years, and we were like 50th in the country, 40th in the country in offense, but it was very respectable at a place like Iowa State because of the talent that we knew that we could recruit compared to what we had to play against every week. And then I get blessed to get the offensive coordinator job at Ohio State, and I'm coaching a young man named Braxton Miller. And my first 2 years with him, he's the Big Ten Conference Player of the Year, and I didn't become a magically better coach. That I can promise you. You know, in my time at Iowa, between Iowa State and Ohio State, what changed was the player, and he was a phenomenal player, and he made me look like a really good coach. Now, without being too self-deprecating, there's a lot of great players that have had poor coaching that have never reached their potential.
You added value. I think
we're gotten better. I don't want to discount the value of coaching by any stretch, but I wasn't a quote unquote different or better coach the day I signed the contract at Ohio State versus the day prior to when I was coaching the 48th best offense in the country. I just happened to sign a contract with a lot better players at my disposal.
Yeah. I mean, coaching is really important. Talent is not rare. You know that. There are lots of people sitting in bars all over the country that'll tell you how good they could have been.
Yeah.
So it's about talent, and the coaching piece is, hey, can we help you to express that talent and realize your potential? You know, can we get you to become the best you can be on and off the field of play? That's the role of coaching, and that's a really critical thing. But without talent, it doesn't really matter. You know, it's not talent alone, but you need the coaching piece too.
Hugh, it's well said, and I have often, it's like first round draft picks, if you will. We're coming off the heels of the NFL draft here in the States, and you know, I've always said, Mom, Dad, and God make first rounders. Coaches don't make first rounders. You know, like that's genetics make first rounders, right? You know, you could resurrect, you know, Vince Lombardi and pull Nick Saban and Bill Belichick out of retirement, put them on the same staff, and they're not going to make an averagely talented player elite first rounder. They're not. And so, you know, as much as I train at this point in my life, I'm not going to run a 4.3 seconds in the 40-yard
It's unlikely. Yeah. Probably not going to happen.
I get to what we call genetic potential. And I think that is the role of a coach, to maximize. God has blessed all of us with different ceilings, if you will, for a multitude of things, for speed, quickness, for intelligence, for empathy, whatever that is, right? And our job as a coach, as a leader, is to help those underneath us reach as close to that ceiling of their genetic potential in all of those areas as we can.
Well, and it's a nice segue, because, you know, you go to Houston for a couple of seasons, you go 22-4, and I'm not too much into the label of underdog or that whole narrative, but clearly you were achieving beyond what was expected of you. I think that's safe to say, right? So, you know, was there anything?
You can use underdog if you want. That's fine.
But, you know, what did that teach you about, you know, that whole idea of whatever, underdogs and kind of out-punting your coverage and all that? You know, was there anything from that? Do you think that's a healthy narrative to have that chip on your shoulder? Does that help, or does it not matter?
Yeah, well, I think it really does speak to the adage of talent eats culture eats talent, for lunch.
Yeah.
Because in 2 years there we played 6 Power 5 schools, which for those unfamiliar with American football, that we were fighting above our weight class, if you will.
Yeah.
And we went 6-0 in 2 years. 3 of those wins were against top 10 teams. 2 of them were against top 5 teams. And I think probably the best way I have to answer that question, Hugh, is I used to say all the time, I would compare myself to the coaches of those top 5, top 10 teams and say, they wouldn't trade rosters with us. They have better players than us. We have a better culture. And I stopped saying that they have better players. And I said, they have better talent than us.
Sure. Yep.
We have a better culture with better football players. Because I think there's a difference between being a great football player, and I was saying it wrong. And I wanted to say it very specifically.
No, I think that's the right way to phrase it. Yeah.
Yes, but they did not have better football players than us.
Yeah.
And so that you said, kind of embracing the underdog. I think it's more a belief in your way of doing things. Now, we had good players. We had a first-round corner at Houston. My first year there, our middle linebacker was a late-round draft pick, but started as a rookie for the New England Patriots. So we had really good players, don't get me wrong, really talented players, right? So I think there was a real belief that, because of the way that we do things, because we're different, and we do things a little bit harder, and we embrace that we can overcome so many deficiencies in talent with our love for each other, with our purpose, right? And then our culture, our toughness. Right. I really believe that belief was what drove that, more so than kind of chip on the shoulder, whatever.
Right. No, I love it. I think you got a fourth C there.
Good enough. We got good enough players. We're not some Division II school that has no chance when we line up.
Yeah, right.
Enough that if we put our culture and our way of doing things on display the right way, we can play with and beat anybody in the country, and we believe that.
Right. I was going to say, you've got a fourth C. You can add conviction to the list, because I think that's a real thing too. So,
very good. Yeah.
Onwards. But anyway, and then you go to Texas, and I'm really interested to hear your take on all this. And I don't know how you feel about it all, but obviously on paper it looked like a pretty successful campaign. 4 bowls and I don't know, lots of good stuff going on. But what were the lessons, and what were the opportunities for growth from all of that?
Yeah, I was proud of much of our time there, and I'm sure there's a book waiting to be printed someday when I finally retire that'll get into a lot juicier details. But no, I
don't need the juice
of that fact. I was proud of, and still am, the fact that when we took over that place, it was 3 straight losing seasons for the only time in the 120 years they've been playing football there, and that is a tough task to weed out that mentality and that those kind of people, to be quite honest with you, because I think at that point there was a lot that were unconvertible, if you will. They were. We would not have enough time, so it's like you just got to move on. And so I was proud of the fact that we squeaked by, with 7 wins in our first season, but we really laid the foundation for then, year 2 when we beat our rival Oklahoma, beat number 5 Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, and I learned
those are big time wins. Those are real outcomes. Yeah.
And so what I learned for probably the most for this time around, one, fit is important for my job and for any leader's job. whether you've got a CEO that's listening, right? Not all CEO jobs are the same, right? And fit,
Sure.
and personality fit, and all of that. With we all got bosses, right?
Right.
And even the boss has a boss, and so fit is important. But also, I realize that I've given myself a little bit of grace this season at FAU for having my own. This is the first time as a head coach I haven't been to a bowl game and after this past season, and so. But I remember, because this situation was a lot different than Houston. Houston was an 8-win team that we took over. That they were very, very close, right? As a program where. Much like at Texas, this program had suffered 3 straight losing seasons and had a lot of work to do. And so we're excited about year 2, but I think I learned that a full culture shift from really, really bad to what you want probably takes more than a year, as evidenced by, what I've gone through now, three different times taking over programs.
Yeah, I agree. It's you can change systems, technical, tactical, sure, but the culture probably takes 2 or 3. Yeah, it takes a while. Yeah.
No doubt.
Anyway, very good.
Tom, I want to talk to you about the culture and the way you describe it. It's very interesting, but could we just take a few more little small steps before we get there? Because there's some other stuff I'd like to get into, and I've got this other terrific quote from you I'd like to play back to you before I ask the question. And you say, if you want to achieve the things that you want to internally achieve, you've got to have fortitude. And you've got to be able to compartmentalize your life and not let the negative things that may be happening in one sector of your life bleed into the jobs that you have to do in other parts of your life. It's a really great quote. It's a really great idea. Really hard to do. Really hard to do for many of us. I'm wondering if there's anything that you found that's more effective in doing that when it comes to trying to achieve this compartmentalization.
Well, I pride myself in that. I pride myself in kind of a certain stoicism on the sideline during games. I fully subscribe to the adage that emotion is the enemy of great decision making, and I really do believe that great decisions are made very emotionless. And I've never understood, and so maybe I'm the wrong person to ask about the how, but I've never understood. I've coached thousands of young men, and they've all had good practices, bad practices, and I use the example like, hey, son, you had a bad practice. What's going on? Well, my girlfriend broke up with me last night. And it's like, well, what the hell does that have to do with football? Like, why for 2.5 hours, your girlfriend's not out here. And I think the biggest mantra we have in our pillars of the program in our program it just simply says 1-0, and that's more than kind of taking it week by week or whatever. I want our guys competing every second of every day, on the task at hand. And, the only thing that can deter them from that is distraction. And so I think it's more so the belief that there's enough room, there's enough time, there's enough room in your bandwidth, there's enough time in the day to deal with everything that you need to deal with separately. And if there's not, then you go to bed and you wake up and you deal with the less urgent things the next day. But when we start letting areas of our life seep into other areas, it especially negatively, it certainly affects everything. And I think, again, you have to believe that to be the case, one, in order to then create some habits or tools maybe that can allow you to be singularly focused in a moment where your body, your chemistry, whatever it is, your physiology says, I want to be nervous, I want to be anxious, I want to be emotional. There's got to be a wade, a deep breath, a mantra, whatever it is for you to be able to recenter yourself and kind of put whatever it is back in its box to be dealt with at the proper time. Now is the time to deal with whatever it is.
I think that's a good point, but because I completely agree. I think we all have emotions. That's fine, but I think generally we're pretty poor at acknowledging emotional control as a thing, and even as a really important tool relative to elite performance. That we're going to have emotions, we're going to have these responses, but being able to, as you said, take a breath and respond to that response. I mean, that's the magic right there. So that instead of acting out of emotion, which at times may be good, but oftentimes I don't think it is optimal, we can be in a more rational space to make the right choice at the right time. So, I think in some ways that kind of emotional control and compartmentalization is also about, hey, whatever's going on outside right now, we need you to be here. So that's about being present. So they're connected, but they're different things you're speaking to, but they're both really, really critical. And, I don't think you hear a lot of coaches talking about it, because a lot of coaches will rely on emotion to try to generate energy. I prefer to talk about, hey, we're trying to create energy, which is an intention and it's something we can control, versus an emotion, which is a response.
Yeah. And
I really like what you're saying there.
And again, I don't think either of us or anybody wants, when you score a touchdown, not to feel happy about it, or when you drop a pass, not to be frustrated or upset, but it's the ability to reset that.
That's exactly right.
That mechanism in your brain, good, bad, and different. By the time you get to whatever it is, the next thing you have to do, for us, it's a play, within 40 seconds or so, you've got to be able to reset and compartmentalize this play and understand that the prior play has no bearing here. So why would I let it even, enter my mind at this point?
Yeah, we're not talking about emotional suppression. We're talking about emotional control. Those are different things. We're not trying to push the emotion down and like they don't exist. They exist. They're a thing, but that doesn't mean we have to succumb to them. Very good. Well, listen, you've been to Houston, Texas. Now you're at FAU, and what do you think? Now you're in a reset or a cultural shift. You've had all these lessons along the way. What are the big rocks? What are the things that you're trying to get in place right away? And in year one, you had we got to get these things going. And year two, you've got some more. Like, is there anything to that, or is it? And I understand these things aren't prescriptive, but generally we know, like, hey, we got to have these things in place for us to have a chance. So, can you give us any insight into that process for you?
Yeah, I think. Getting the staff together was a critical piece, and then obviously going into year two, maintaining continuity in that staff and making sure that they have spent the year growing as coaches and as support staff members, what have you, and then it's about player evaluation, whether it be your current roster and who fits and who doesn't. And then recruiting wise, what do we need? And what kind of position do we need? And what kind of person do we need as well? And so I think it has certainly made year two, going into year two, feel a lot more rhythmic, maybe is the best way to put it, that there's a system in place, and we're all kind of we understand what each day is going to bring now. It's not, hey, what's tomorrow going to look like, kind of thing.
Yeah. You're not waiting for the next grenade, and you're not you're not a fireman.
Tom, you talk about the power and importance of being parental. Now, as a role model and a leader, what do you want men to do more of when it comes to taking this kind of position with teams?
Be present. Would be the biggest first step. I've always told my staff members, if there's a tie in recruiting, there never is, but if the kid's got the exact same height, the exact same weight, the exact same measurables, then one has a dad in his life and one doesn't, we're probably going to favor the one that does, because I have just seen the power of when we get them at 18 years old, the differences that influence, in my opinion, has on these young men. And so I think for those men being present is really, really important. And you talked about the word parental. I also, I hope we use the word love more than any program in the country, real genuine love. I think that and fear are the two biggest motivating factors in a human being's life. And so we're able to do things as human beings that we have no earthly idea what we're able to do through the power of love and commitment. But so I hope that we use that word a lot. And I say when you become a parent, you don't hold your newborn baby for the first time and wait to see how smart they're going to be or how tall they're going to be or how fast they're going to run to love them. You love them because they're yours. And so when a parent drops their young man off to us, I don't care who he is, what he's done in his past, he's ours, and we love him and unconditionally at that point. And we're going to provide him with every tool and resource known to man to be successful. But much like a parent, we're going to hold them to some very high standards. And, if those standards aren't met, there'll be consequences for that, as well as education on how to meet them the next time.
This focus on love comes through in all the interviews with you. But there's one thing you do that is so unique. And I've heard you talk about you kiss every player before they go on the field. Could you tell us? It's such an intimate thing to do. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about it.
Well, I don't do it anymore, to be honest with you, Paul. Simply in today's day and age, it rubs some people the wrong way, and that's okay. But I know when I used to, I said, like, I grew up in a very Italian household, and so I kissed my uncles and on the cheek, and that was a way for us to tell them I love them. And if I was sending my son out, what our guys do is very gladiatorial. Now, obviously, we're not fighting to the death, but we're putting on a bunch of armor, right? And we're going and smashing ourselves into each other for the entertainment of the masses, right? And so I know if my actual blood son, TD or Maverick, were about to go out and do what our guys do for 3 hours every Saturday, I'd give them a big hug, a big kiss on the cheek, and tell them I love them and that I'm proud of them. And so all of that, minus the kiss on the cheek, is still present, though. I tell every kid that pregame that I love them. I give them a big hug. I tell them I'm proud of them and that I'm excited to watch them play, because I know that if that were my actual son, that's what I'd be telling him.
Fantastic. Coach Herman, thank you for your time. I know you're busy there getting ready for the season ahead, but I do appreciate you carving out some time to talk to us.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah. Thanks, Hugh. Appreciate it.
Yeah, really a pleasure. Cheers, Coach.
You're listening to the Great Coaches Podcast.
Coach Hugh McCutcheon, another coach talking about sending their athletes, using gladiatorial analogies, sending them off to war. What do you make of all this?
I think football is really unique in that regard. I mean, the unadulterated violence that is associated with the sport is real. And so to that end, I think that idea of trying to connect the sense of belonging or the unity is probably important, because it has to be like you're putting yourself in harm's way every weekend. And so it's got to be for some greater purpose. And as you said, there's no greater motivator than love or fear.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're going to scare them into going out there. So you probably need to love them into getting out there. And I think there are other football coaches that would follow something similar in terms of a method, and not that it's not authentic or that it's not coming from the right place, but I think like getting ready to get into those moments of contact and to get into that whole thing. I understand it. Now, I've never been in that space, so I can't say I would or wouldn't do that. But I would say that I absolutely loved our athletes in the philia sense of love. You know, the Greeks had it, whatever, 7 different ways or whatever. But this whole idea of camaraderie. But I was absolutely in it with them, and I'd do anything for them. I'd help them out. Yeah, I mean, within reason, right? But to be consistent and to be a person in their life that they know they can count in day in, day out, I think that's something that's really important. And maybe that's the parental thing that he's speaking to there too, that hey, this person's in it with me regardless, because unfortunately, oftentimes it's not like that. It becomes more transactional.
I loved this idea. I'd never heard it where he said it's not about X's and O's, it's about Jimmy and Joe's.
Jimmy's and Joe's.
I'd never heard that. I'd never heard that before.
Yeah, that's an American thing that they throw around from time to time. Yeah.
I thought it was
It's a good quote.
It was a very good quote, you know, and there was a couple of other things he sort of said in there that really connected with me. This whole idea of waking up before the alarm, I thought was good too. But you said something in there that I thought was interesting too. I hadn't heard you mention before, where you talked about energy being intention.
Yeah, well, so like when he started talking about compartmentalization, I was trying to separate the two because he was connecting emotional control to compartmentalization. Whereas I think those are different things, right? I mean, I'm sad because my girlfriend left me. Okay, I'm having that emotional response, but then also, hey, I'm at football practice. There's nothing I can do about my girlfriend right now. That's compartmentalization, right? So I think, when I would talk to our athletes around how to learn how to control emotion, because I think you have to learn it, because I don't think we teach it very well societally, we would talk about energy as something that we wanted to base our rate of psychological arousal or whatever around. And the reason we went with it, the reason I say energy is because I can bring good energy to something. I can do that. I can give high fives and I can smile and I can give that in my body language and my actual language and even in my performance. And that's something that I can choose to engage in versus I'm feeling happy or I'm feeling sad. And now I'm having an emotion and somehow that emotion becomes my action. Because emotions, as we know, can be a bit of a roller coaster, whereas energy can be consistent. And like I said, it's a choice. So that's where it's an intention. Like, hey, even though I'm not having my best day today, I choose to be a good teammate, bring good energy, whatever it is I can do to help the team win. So, yeah, I don't know how you feel about that, but I thought it worked pretty well.
I thought, I found it was parts of it I thought were fascinating. This idea of parental as being an important part of his program, and I think you have to understand his context around that.
Yeah,
I think what's also interesting about Tom Herman is the situation that he experienced at Texas was difficult, and it was written about quite extensively, and he's living his own beliefs. He's got back out there again, and he's building what I'm sure will be another successful program. He's not letting it knock him back. Right. He's moving forward, and I think that in itself is a great example to all of us. So I thought his examples and the way his career is unfolded has been very interesting. There's been some big quick peaks, and then it's dropped, and he's building it up again. And I think that's quite fascinating to talk to someone who's been through that.
Yeah, absolutely. I got a couple of things in response. I think the parental thing is connected to this idea of belonging. As in like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, love and belonging is in there. And that's one of the biggest strings to any coach's bow is this idea of having people feel connected to their program in real and meaningful ways. But that being said, having that expressed in a parental way I think it's well intended, but I think oftentimes it can get a bit complicated because one of the things, I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way to do it, but I would go out of my way to tell people that we're not a family, that we're trying to be a high functioning team. And the reason I would say that is because, families have to tolerate a level of dysfunction that I'm not interested in having on a team that's trying to be the best in the country at what they do. And that doesn't mean that we don't accept everybody's humanity, but we can also kind of have a reset for the whole group around what are the expected behaviors around that. I mean, if you Google family, there's about, and this is a starting point for the discussion, but 10 different types of families pop up. There's nuclear, there's same sex, there's grandparent family, there's foster, adopted, on and on and on and on, right? And so what family means to you might be different to me. And then if you choose to go down the parental path, then, what's that power dynamic? I'm your dad and you're my kid. Like, well, I mean, I care about you like that, but I can care about you as a coach and a player and without having to make it into this family construct. Because where I'm going with it is when you say, okay, we choose to be a team. Well, now we can say, okay, when you're on a high functioning team, here's a list of teammate behaviors that go with that. And everybody can say, okay, this is how we operate versus making assumptions based on whatever your familial experience was and whatever my familial experience was, and somehow trying to mesh those two paradigms, which may or may not be aligned. So we're not perpetuating any stereotypes. We're not, creating narratives that really aren't accurate. What we're doing is resetting and giving everyone a chance to belong and connect in real and authentic ways that gives the team the best chance of success. Now, I get it. That's a bit of a rant. And maybe it's not particularly popular, but I think it's a pretty healthy way to view it.
I was reflecting on this recently. When I was working the job before last, every month we'd have a town hall meeting, and I'd ask new people to raise their hand if they were here, or if they were on the Zoom, I'd ask them to put their thumbs up. And I'd say a version of, welcome to the family. I hope you enjoy your time working here. And it was only recently where someone said to me, perhaps you shouldn't have said that. And I thought, well, for me, it felt a bit like a family. Definitely the relationships I'd made through those organizations weren't quite parental, but they were definitely closer than uncle and auntie. They weren't particularly like my brothers. I've only got one sibling, a brother, but they were much, much closer than cousins. And so I felt like I was inviting people to join something where they would make and form relationships that would extend long into their life.
Yeah.
And their connection to the organization. But again, the companies were 200+ years old. They weren't startups. They were companies they were breweries. So they had long history.
But again, I think the sense of belonging can happen without maybe throwing that label on it. But like it is, it's warm and it's fuzzy and it feels good until it doesn't. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
As in, he's at Florida Atlantic in the, is it the American Conference? I can't remember which conference.
I think it's the AC, yeah.
So the way college football is going with NIL and pay to play and, the ever-changing landscape, that the ability to make that program, the underdog narrative is getting harder and harder. How about that? The resources, there'll be a continued division between kind of haves and have-nots in college football and even within athletic departments. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be a hard deal because the Big Ten and the SEC will start pulling away. That's the CFP that there and athletes, the best athletes will want to play in the best conferences and they'll want to get the most money. It's going to get nuttier. So he's in it.
You, as always, it's terrific to talk to you and get your perspective on all things coaching and leadership. Thank you for joining us again, and look forward to the next time.
Sounds good. All right, mate.